Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the Monday show on a Tuesday with me, Andrew Musgrove, and him, Aaron Stokes. I'm back after a few days away and there is plenty to talk about. Newcastle through the Battle of St Andrews and ready for a tie against Brighton in the fifth round of the FA Cup. We've got Dan Burn picking up an injury and whether allowing Lloyd Kelly to go might come back to bite the club on the behind. We've got the ticket details announced for the Carabao Cup Final and a few questions sent in by you lot for myself and Aaron to get through. As always, thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring the podcast. As I said, I've been away and the property that I was at only had public Wi-Fi, so I was over the moon to be able to use my NordVPN plan, not only on my phone, but across several other devices too, to keep my data safe. And look, I always say that the plan costs the same as a premium cup of coffee. Well, now I've got the prices in front of me. The basic plan via the link in our podcast description box costs only £2.22 per month, while the ultimate plan costs £4.53 per month, both with an extra 4 months as well. So get signed up, protect yourself and protect and support the podcast rather. Aaron, look at this, proper commitment from yourself. You're off today, a well-earned day off, and yet you're still coming out of the podcast. That's commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not every day Newcastle United get through another cup round, is it? Or actually, you know what it is? It is becoming quite a familiar theme, isn't it? Newcastle United not content with just one cup run. They're in the hat for another. I think we'll agree a decent draw. You'll take that last night?
I think as it's at home, definitely. If I had my pick, I would have maybe gone for a lower league opposition rather than Brighton, who are dangerous on their day. We've seen that with how they defeated Newcastle up in the league not too long ago. So it's still a very dangerous side. I don't think it's by any means a foregone conclusion that Newcastle are getting to Wembley for a second time this season. A lot of people seem to have that conclusion after this weekend's results. There's still a lot of dangerous sides in there, and Brighton are certainly one of them. I said there in the introduction, Aaron, the Battle of St Andrews, because it was very, very bruising for Newcastle United. I imagine, even though it's a few days after the victory, quite a few are still recovering from what was a difficult afternoon in the Midlands.
Yeah, well, it looks like Eddie Howe might have given the players a couple of days break, which I think was well earned after Saturday afternoon's exploits. I think one thing we can say is Joelinton will have been sat at home thinking, why am I not in this game? It was right up his street, a proper cup tie, a real, ding dong. And I think fair play to Birmingham. They really did put it up to Newcastle physically. Newcastle's fringe players had to weather a bit of a storm. And I thought they did. I thought they were brilliant, very, very physical. And yeah, look, they came through it despite, maybe not being at their best.
Do you think Eddie Howe was expecting such a test from Birmingham? I mean, he played quite a strong side, Bruno in the middle, for example. Do you think he was expecting Birmingham to go as much into their faces, very very strong, very physical? Because it was, as we say, a very difficult afternoon for Newcastle.
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, we spoke to him Friday and he sort of said, they're a very physical team. They're very, aggressive on the front foot. And I think, anybody who listened to the opposition podcast last week, I was pretty worried about Birmingham because, as we said on that episode, they're not a League One team, really. They're building for the future. They're building for the Championship. They're going to go up this season. It's all but certain. So I think Eddie Howe was ready for it. I think it maybe played in Newcastle's hands a little bit that they were actually so willing to be on the front foot and attack them, because it did allow the spaces to open up for Newcastle to exploit. But yeah, I mean, some of the players that were involved on Saturday probably haven't been involved in games like that. William Osula, for one, has probably never come up against a fullback like Alex Cochrane, who was literally just, not letting him go. Joe Willock, I thought, did well. A tough game for Callum Wilson to return in because, you probably want him as far away from anybody else as possible because you don't want him to get injured again. But I thought they all came through it really well. They all managed it. They all kept their heads. Maybe with VAR in action, we might have seen some different decisions and some more cards brandish. But I thought on the whole, it was a really, really enjoyable game.
Yeah, we'll get on to several of those players that you mentioned there because they all deserve their 5 minutes in the spotlight on this episode. We've got Graham saying, with Arsenal, Liverpool and Chelsea out, surely we have to fancy our chances. Everyone else is beatable. And I get why there's optimism. I do, because Newcastle United are second favourites to win the FA Cup now, but I don't think you can write off the likes of Bournemouth. You can't write off the likes of Brighton. As I've said, there's a real arrogance, I think, if you think Newcastle United have got a clear path to Wembley, because even if they don't face a top Premier League side in the next round, so they get through against Brighton, then, you know, there's still a chance of an upset, as we saw with Liverpool against Plymouth. It's just that kind of competition. As you mentioned there, Aaron, Callum Wilson back in the starting 11. Great to see him start and great to see him get back on the score sheet. And look, I said I didn't think we'd see him play for Newcastle United again. I hold my hands up. I was wrong, and I'm so glad to be proved wrong, because I think what we see with him on the bench, also when he's available to start, Newcastle United just look much more of a threat. It gives Eddie Howe such an important option for change and rotation, whether that be him coming off the bench or starting in games like this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, first and foremost, you just got to be glad that he's came through it unscathed. It seems he was speaking really well on the BBC afterwards and saying, you know, he's put a lot of work in behind the scenes. They've kept him back, you know, on purpose to make sure that when he was coming back into the team, he wasn't just having to come off the bench and build his fitness up. He was able to, you know, hit the ground running and start. Anytime you speak to Eddie Howe about him, he praises his professionalism behind the scenes and says that, you know, he really has put the work in. Great for him to get a goal. I saw a stat on Twitter, and I mean, I haven't checked this out, but I assume it's right. That was his first FA Cup appearance for Newcastle.
That can't be right.
It can't be right, but I have seen it from a reputable source, but I will have to check that out. But yeah, look, really good, really impressive. I know we're going to get on and talk about Will Osula, rightly so, but I think Callum Wilson coming back will probably take the pressure off Osula. It might even make Osula become more of a winger between now and the end of the season and sort of replace Miguel Almiron in that role. I thought he played very, very well. But yeah, great to see Wilson back. Just before we go on to your next point, I just want to sort of go back to what you said a couple of minutes ago. How come there was so much optimism from you, blind optimism, blind faith and hope that they were going to get to the Carabao Cup final? You had the tickets booked after Wimbledon, but this time around, you know, some of the big boys are out, and you're keeping your feet on the ground this time.
Do you know what? I don't know whether it's just the nature of the FA Cup. I don't know. I just felt that this is our time when it comes to the Carabao Cup, and I still feel like Newcastle United are going to end that way to lift a domestic trophy. I mean, it wouldn't be fit in 70 years this year since that 1955 FA Cup victory. There was just something stirring within us that says we were going to get to the final and that we are going to lift the League Cup. The FA Cup, I don't know. I'm not as confident. I think my initial, as you would call it, blind optimism, blind faith, I disagree with the term, but I'll allow you to have it. It came at a time when Newcastle were on this wave of great results, great form. They've hit a bit of a rocky patch by their standards of late. So, you know, maybe we get through to Brighton and then the next round they've got on an unbeaten run of however many games, then I might change my mind and get the hotels. But just right now, just keeping my feet on the ground, because there's still some very dangerous sides in that competition. But it sounds like, Aaron, you might have already booked your hotel.
No, I'm sticking to my thinking about what there was with the Carabao Cup, that I think they're going to... it'll be tough, I agree with you for once, but yeah, I'm not too sure. There's still some good sides in, but also I'm really happy with the draw. Some big teams went out over the weekend, and Eddie Howe will be, you know, given this competition the same amount of importance as he was the Carabao Cup. Just before we move on, I have just looked about that Callum Wilson stat, and Saturday was his first FA Cup game for Newcastle. His last one came in the 1920 season for Bournemouth. That is ridiculous.
What else is ridiculous? I'm assuming you've used the same website that I have, transfermarket.com. He's only on 99 Premier League appearances for Newcastle United. That in itself is a crazy, crazy stat, because a player of his talent and ability should be on so many more games in the Premier League for Newcastle United. And it leads us nicely on to my next question, because reports over the weekend that Newcastle are considering giving Callum Wilson a new deal, and this one will provoke plenty of discussion in the comments, so do make sure you share your view. For me, I wouldn't be on board giving Callum Wilson a new deal. He's a tremendous striker. Even though he's featured in the last two games, I just question how reliable he can be next season. It is the £1 million question, isn't it, Aaron? If you can guarantee his fitness, then giving him an extra year might not be the worst idea, but you can't guarantee anyone's fitness in this game, let alone Callum Wilson's. Given his injury record, he'll be on a healthy wage. You would imagine a new deal would come with a bit of a pay rise. If Newcastle in the Champions League next season, touch wood they are, we do not want Newcastle to be in the same scenario that they found themselves in the last few months when they haven't got a recognised striker to come in and rival Alexander Isak, to compete with him, to change games when it's not going his way. For me, I'd thank Callum Wilson for what he's done. Hopefully he can score the winner in the Carabao Cup final, but then I would send him off into the sunset. I don't think getting him a new deal, even with the rules and restrictions around PSR or the change in the squad cost ratio rules, signing a new deal for me just wouldn't be right.
I'm glad you're not in Paul Mitchell's job, because if you were, Newcastle would have no players left, because that's Callum Wilson, Fabian Schär. Who else is going to be out of contract in the summer? That's got to go. I'm gonna disagree with you on Callum Wilson, and I'm ready to get the pelters for it. I think if you want to give him a new deal, and it's essentially on a pay-to-play basis, massively restricted wages if he's not fit, and you go out and sign, another striker, I think there's absolutely no problem with having Callum Wilson in your side.
If that's the way they do it, then I change my mind completely. If you are paying him based on how many games he pays, and even if he takes a significant wage reduction, he gets a base rate of, let's say, I don't know, let's throw a number out there, £25,000 a week, and then he gets it topped up by, however many minutes he plays or every game he plays, then fair enough, I'd be on board with that. But can you see that happening? Can you really see that happening? I can't see Callum Wilson accepting a deal like that.
It's happened elsewhere a lot of times. I remember, specifically Arsenal players used to do it quite a lot. Abu Dhabi, Jack Wilshere, when they were really struggling with injuries. Now, I don't know whether Callum Wilson falls into that category. I mean, he is very injury prone, but sometimes you can't get half a season out of him. Look, I don't know, but I wouldn't really be in a rush to be letting any Newcastle United first team player go on a free, especially not in the world of PSR. Even if you wanted to, Fabian Schär to go this summer, which some might, I think you need to give him a new deal. You need to try and get a couple of million for him. And I think the same for Callum Wilson if you are going to sell him. But I think if Newcastle go out in the summer, sign a striker, and you've essentially got Isak, this new backup, and Callum Wilson as your three, with Will Osula and maybe someone like Ben Parkinson or Sean Neve coming up from the academy. I think that is a good, sort of solid base to have as attacking options. And also your point about the Champions League, I think, you're saying you don't want them to be in the situation of not having a striker, but I actually think with more games, you are going to need that bigger squad. And I think that's why Callum Wilson could have a part to play in the future.
You're going to need the bigger squad, but you're going to need a striker that you can rely upon. And is Callum Wilson that man? I hope to the high heavens that he is, because as I say, there are a few better in black and white, probably only Alexander Isak in recent years, that are better than Callum Wilson. But I've just been stung too many times. He's broken my heart far too often to back him to play a significant role next season. But hopefully, once again, I am proved wrong. And if I am, I will hold my hands up, and I will absolutely love to be proved wrong by Callum Wilson. He's not started too badly since returning from injury and shutting me up. Right, back to the game then. Laird got the opener within 40 seconds or so for Birmingham. Very poor defending once again from Newcastle United. And we've said this over the last few weeks, haven't we, Aaron, that it's such an important test of character to then react and come back from an early goal that you've conceded. But as I've said there, we've said it far too often, and that's surely something that Eddie Howe will be looking to work upon, to stop conceding so early on and to stop conceding such poor goals as well.
Yeah, it was a poor one to concede, especially so early. I was a little bit worried when they went one down, because I thought the atmosphere at St Andrews, they really had the place rocking the home fans. It's a very, very tough place to go anyway. And as we were saying before the game, they're 18 games unbeaten before Saturday. And I think getting that 8 goal would have really propelled them. Newcastle had to weather a real storm in the next 15 minutes. They did. And then they absolutely flipped the game on its head, shortly after. But certainly it'll be something Eddie Howe will want to address going forward.
Newcastle's equaliser came via Joe Willock, his first of 2 of the night. And Birmingham fans may feel a little hard done by for this one. The linesman flagging to signal the ball had gone over the line, with keeper Bailey Peacock-Farrell thinking that he'd kept it out. First off, great work from Wilson and Osula. Great cross from Newcastle's number 9 from the left. He just needed himself in the box to put it in the back of the net. Great work then from Osula to keep it alive for Willock to put it home. First question, Aaron, was the ball over the line?
I mean, we never will know really, won't we? But certainly for me, I didn't think it was. I think how on earth the linesman can give that from there, at that angle, at that far away. And even, when the ball looks like it's over the line sometimes with goal line technology, there's still a slither over it. I don't think it was a goal. I think if you're a Birmingham City fan, you'd be absolutely aggrieved by it. One thing that really, really winds me up is the fact that we can have competitions like this and some grounds can have VAR, goal line technology, others can't. Essentially Birmingham, if they've made it the next round, last season, being a championship team, could have had all the technology, but now they're in League One, they can't. I just think it's ridiculous, but that's for a pod for another day. That's a moan for another day. I certainly didn't think it was a definitive goal, but Newcastle got lucky. We can't complain too much, but I think if you're Birmingham, you're feeling really, really aggrieved by that.
Yeah, thankfully Newcastle got the rub with the green there. But I was really impressed with Callum Wilson's play, kind of outside that typical number 9 striker that we've come to love him for. He was a little bit more really in the mould of Alexander Isak at times, drifting off to the wide flank. And we saw that really through Callum Wilson's early years at Newcastle United, where he would often drift off the left and come on in. There was a particular game against Everton, I remember, around about the COVID time, where he was absolutely brilliant at that. But I felt he showed real strength and a little bit of a different side to his game that maybe we haven't seen in recent years in that performance against Birmingham.
Yeah, quite an atypical Callum Wilson performance in the fact that he's usually that poacher in the box. But I agree. I thought that work for the first goal was brilliant. He did it all afternoon. He only played 55 minutes of the game before coming off. I thought that was quite a smart move by Eddie Howe. But he'll be absolutely delighted with that performance. And as you say, we maybe saw some parts of this game that we aren't used to seeing. The challenge now is making sure he gets that 100th Premier League appearance first and foremost, and then hopefully can stay fit between now and the end of the season.
One thing of Callum Wilson's that we did see was him getting on the score sheet, and he probably won't score an easier goal than this. Just need to tap it home after Joe Willock and Osula hit their efforts. And what I enjoyed about the goal was that the camera angle shows Joe Willock pointing to Osula. I'm just trying to work out what he's saying. Is he saying, "I'm glad that you messed that up just as bad as I did, and then thanks to Callum for tapping it home," because both of them should have scored, really. Wilson's first goal since May, 4-1 win over Burnley. That's just going to do his confidence the world of good.
Yeah, it felt a little bit of a cop-out writing in articles the last couple of days that Osula got 2 assists because he probably never have a worse assist than that in his career, and he knew very little about it. But yeah, look, Callum Wilson will be absolutely delighted by that. The one thing you can guarantee with him, apart from the fact that he might pick up an injury or two, is when he comes back, he usually hits the ground running. He usually scores goals straight away. And even though it wasn't maybe the cutest or the tidiest of finishes, he had to be there. He had to score it. And look, just on a wider point, I was really impressed with how Newcastle wrestled the game back from Birmingham. As I talked about earlier in the show, that atmosphere was making it really tough for them. And to get those 2 goals in quick succession really did help turn the game on its head. And I must admit, I think going into the game, there was probably some worries about that front 3. Wilson coming back, we don't know how fit he's going to be. We haven't seen Osula on the right, and Joe Willock's been bang out of form. But I think the 3 of them as a trio will be really, really buoyed by that performance.
We've got Peter saying, I agree, Aaron. If Wilson only gets paid when he plays, that's fine. And a reduced wage when unfit. He says, as for Cher, though, his time is coming to an end. And we mentioned already in the show, but obviously it's a big 6 weeks coming up for Newcastle United. League Cup Final is on the horizon. And what Eddie Howe is going to want is the options up top. And this is where James Bunce probably really earns his money, isn't it? Callum Wilson, everyone's got their own opinions about the last time he returned, and it didn't quite work out, and obviously picked up another injury. If they can manage him right going into the final, the one thing that you will get above Callum Wilson's goals and his effort and his commitment is the fact that Alexander Isak will not be burnt out heading into that final. And look, Eddie Howe's not a man who thinks too far ahead. He's already said that actually we've got to put the final to the back of our minds. We don't want to think about it. Got loads of games coming up, Champions League football still very much on the cards. But I think if he can get to the final, having not used Isak sparingly because he's going to want to play and Eddie Howe's going to want to have used his best players because that's how you win games. But he'll be over the moon if Callum Wilson is fit and available to be picked.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head there. This is why James Bunce was brought in, not only for Callum Wilson, but for players like Sven Botman, who are, coming back off really serious injuries, and after the calamitous year last year with the bad injury luck or whatever you want to call it, Newcastle really have had to put things right. Now, I'm sure we're going to talk about it towards the end of the episode, that maybe those injuries are starting to creep back in, certainly at the back. But yeah, look, it's all about managing Callum Wilson well, which they've tried to do in recent years, not even just this season. He's got very limited training with the other players. He has specialist programs, specialist gym routines. So sort of part of me thinks it's just an element of keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that this time's different. People in the comments and people listening will have their own opinions on that, because this is Callum Wilson we're talking about, and everybody knows what he's about. But so far so good. You need to hope that Alexander Isak stays fit as well. Osula coming into the team and playing more of a role will certainly help him as well. But I'm certainly just sat here keeping everything crossed above all else.
Well, the build up to that goal for Callum Wilson, I really want to talk about Will Osula, because he started out on the flank, as you said, in that front three. I thought he was immense. I thought he was really, really good. And yes, it was against League One opposition, but as you've said, Aaron, they're not a League One side, really. They're maybe a top 10 championship side. He looked right at home on the right of that front three. He had purpose, he had strength, he was up for the fight, which was really, really important, because Birmingham were not holding anything back. And that goal for Wilson, long ball down from Nick Pope, Osula with a fantastic bit of control, turn, run, great shot on goal, forces a great save. Look, I was already convinced from the brief cameos that I'd seen of Osula that there was a player there. I am more than convinced now, even more so, that there was a player there, because I thought he was just absolutely superb against Birmingham.
Yeah, I think that was probably the best we've seen him, I thought, on Saturday. Very lively, very busy. He's still very, very raw. But I think there's definitely a player there. And I think, Eddie Howe, speaking after the game, sort of alluded to the fact that he's been really impressive behind the scenes. And he's now, I think the term that Eddie Howe used was, he's a massive player for us. Now, I think he's going to have to be in the running, because, as I say, injuries are picking up. He essentially could be the second choice right winger now behind Jacob Murphy, because, as I say, no Almiron replacement. Sanusi or players like that are going to be nowhere near the first team. So the fact that not only Eddie Howe trusted him to play in that position, but actually probably dropped his best display of the season, and it gives you real hope. There's definitely still work to be done. I don't want to get too carried away, but I thought there was a lot to like. And also, as you mentioned there, that physical aspect of his game, doesn't shirk a challenge, stands up to the players, kept his head really well, I thought, because, a young kid, 21 years of age, they were really targeting him down that Birmingham side, weren't they? The left back, and even Jay Stansfield, the striker, had a pop. But I thought he carried himself really well. And again, we've just been talking about Wilson and Willock and what it'll do for their confidence. But Will Osula will definitely benefit from that sort of display as well.
A lot of people have said, he kind of runs head down. He's a bit all over the place. I've said on this podcast, reminds me slightly of Miguel Almiron in the way he does kind of just run down in every kind of avenue that he can. But I thought he was much more contained on Saturday. I thought he was much more disciplined. And as I said, he had a bit of purpose about him. He really was eager to impress. And we saw him, get a shot off. There was a good turn, which was then blocked as he tried to get another shot off. And really interesting that when I spoke to a Sheffield United fan about Osula, he said, if he'd stayed at Sheffield United, he would have been first choice winger this season, not first choice striker, but he would have been on one of the wings. And that's where we saw him deployed against Birmingham. And yeah, maybe that's the way forward, as a not only maybe a backup to Jacob Murphy, but someone who can actively compete with Jacob Murphy, who of course came off the bench and helped Newcastle United to victory. But yeah, brilliant from Will Osula. And as you said as well, great to see him not shirk the physicality of the evening, because it maybe would have been very easy for him to lose his head in many ways. He hasn't had too many starts. He's been handed this start going into what was a really difficult atmosphere. It was clear that Birmingham had been given the instructions to go out and really, rough up Newcastle, for want of a better phrase. But he was all for it. He was standing his ground. He was shoving. He was pushing. He was giving as good as he got. I just was very impressed in all aspects of his game, really.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a quote here from Eddie Howe just sort of hinting about what the future might hold for him in terms of position. And he said, I think he can play in any of the front three positions. I think anything that showcases his pace, that's his best asset. You saw that with his direct running. There's a few rough edges that we need to improve, keep working on and developing him, but he's a massive player for us now.
Yeah, certainly so. And hopefully he can build on that. Omar says, looks like a wild card, really good talent. Peter says, I like him, but does he not need to slow down a touch? Look, I'm proper talking him up here, but as Aaron says, he's not the finished article by any stretch of the imagination. Loads of work to be done. And I'm sure Eddie Howe will be doing all he can to just kind of polish him up and make him into the player that he definitely looks like he can be. As we've said, Newcastle didn't have it all their own way. Jay Stansfield should have scored, but headed home unmarked in the box, or wide, thankfully, unmarked in the box. And then bang, one of the finest goals I've seen this season from Tamuki, hitting a half volley from distance with such a pace. Absolutely no stopping it. What a fantastic strike it was, Aaron.
Yeah, unbelievable. Genuinely was absolutely fantastic. I've seen a few people, and
I knew this was coming. I knew it was coming. I didn't mention it in the question, but I knew you were going to go down this avenue.
No, I don't think I'm going to go down the avenue you think I'm going down. I've seen a couple of people in the last couple of days criticising Nick Pope, not just for that goal, but for the performance in general. A few people, and it's the usual voices on social media saying, he's past it, it's time to let him go. And I'm thinking, well, the first goal was deflected off Callum Wilson, and the second one, I don't even think even prime Petr Cech is stopping that. So, what more do you want from him, really? I can't understand it. But as a goal, yeah, it was ridiculous. It will probably win FA Cup goal this season, and rightly so.
Nick Pope drops out for the game against City.
Am I dropping him out, or is Eddie Howe dropping him out?
Both. Come on, answer. What are you doing first off?
I put Martin Dubravka back in.
And Eddie Howe?
Eddie Howe puts Martin Dubravka back in.
There we go. Let us know in the comments. Second half, there was a change made. Sandro Tonali came on. Really important. Got a really good hold of the game. Good old tie, wasn't it? Good old cup tie in the second half. Plenty of physical challenges, plenty of bite. As we said, clearly Birmingham's game plan was to hit Newcastle United as hard as they could, but great to see they were up for it. Different type of game that they've been used to. I don't think we've really seen Newcastle have this challenge too many times, if at all. And I genuinely think that the performance and the battle that they had to overcome, that physicality that they had to come through, it could prove to be much more than just progress in the FA Cup. It could be one of those kind of results that defines your season in many ways.
Yeah, and I think one thing for me that I was really, really impressed with about Saturday, and I agree with what you're saying, I think the confidence it will give some of those fringe players. I mean, Joe Willock needed that performance crucially. Will Osula will come on leaps and bounds for it. Wilson's back in amongst the goals. Even at the back, Nick Pope will be better for that performance. We saw like Target coming back in, Kraft coming back in and doing well, Miley getting some game time. So really, really important for some of those fringe players, because you look around that squad now and it is so thin. I mean, it is so bare at the minute. And that it was like that even at the end of the January window, never mind the fact that some injuries are starting to creep in. So the fact that the likes of Willock and Miley and Kraft are coming in and playing well is a massive boost for Eddie Howe.
It's interesting that you mentioned how stretched the squad is. And I guess in an ideal world, you wouldn't have wanted to have brought Sandro Tonali onto the pitch, because obviously they've played a lot of games in recent games. The Arsenal game would have taken it out of most athletes, let alone one of the best athletes I've ever seen in black and white. But you look at the bench, he had no one else to turn to. And then you look at the Dan Burn injury. Quite clearly, Dan Burn, you can see he's holding his groin. He says groin as he goes off the pitch. Eddie Howe has said it's a big concern. Has to bring Fabian Schär on. That's 10 minutes into the second half. And again, in an ideal world, there's no way he's wanting to bring Fabian Schär on, I don't think. Look, and he might argue with me and say it was always part of the game plan, at least to bring Tonali on for Bruno, because rather than giving them the rest, we just give them less playing time, but it means they're keeping fresh, they're keeping their energy levels up, and that might have been the game plan. I don't know, but I just think Tonali on, Schär on, and then the concern with Dan Burn, it re-emphasised that maybe the squad depth just isn't there.
Yeah, I think Bruno Furtinali at half-time was definitely planned, but I think the one thing that stood out to me afterwards was Eddie Howe saying that he didn't really want to start Dan Burn in that game. I mean, that just goes to show, how stretched they are when he's actually having to play a centre-back that he doesn't want to play. You have to hope that groin injury isn't serious, because obviously there's no Lloyd Kelly to come back in. There's still no Jamal Lascelles. They are looking really, really light now in a few areas. We've just got to keep our fingers crossed that it's not going to be, weeks or months, and it's going to be days, but it didn't look good. Joe Linton being out for a couple of weeks is going to stretch them. We know that their options in attack aren't too good either. So, yeah, again, we need to be keeping our fingers crossed that the next couple of weeks doesn't prove too testing. They can get players back in and around the cup final.
It's not often Eddie Howe comes out when it's an injury and says it's a big concern. He's usually quite guarded, or maybe even plays it down in certain incidences. But he said that. He said it was a big concern. So we'll have to keep everything crossed that it isn't, because, I mean, who does he turn to against Manchester City? I mean, Sven Botman obviously goes off against Arsenal. The other knee is an injury. Jamal Lascelles isn't back fighting fit yet, likely to be another few weeks at the very least. It's probably would have to be Emil Kraft, right? Alongside Fabian Schär. And then who have we got on the bench?
Yeah, it all depends on the severity of Botman's injury. We spoke to Eddie Howe Friday, and he said that he doesn't think it's a serious one, but it would be enough to keep him out of Birmingham. He didn't want to risk him at all travelling down there, which makes me think, is it maybe a little bit serious, or more serious than you're letting on? We'll have to, obviously know later in the week. It will probably then have to be Kraft and Schär. There's no recall clause for Alex Murphy. Charlie MacArthur's gone out on loan as well. I mean, you're down to the bare bones, aren't you? You're really struggling. I mean, even Schär and Kraft, two very good operators on their own, but who do you put at left centre back? You're having to move Fabian Schär out of his usual position if you switch him from the right to the left. So we have to keep our fingers crossed, really, that Botman's not serious, and neither's Dan Burn.
People will point to the Lloyd Kelly exit, but I think that even had this injury occurred prior to that deal being concluded, I still think they would have gone ahead with the sale, because it was just too good of a bag of money to turn down. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I think signing a player for 3 and then selling them 6 months later for what could potentially turn out to be over 20 million is as you say, too good to turn down. It's business logic ruling over football logic, as Eddie Howe said last month, and it's sort of coming home to roost now, unfortunately.
There is another injury to talk about as well. Anthony Gordon, I think there's a quad injury, anyhow, said. He said hopefully be in contention for the game against Manchester City. But let's say he's not. Then there's another question about who starts out on the left, because you're missing Joe Linton, who might be the obvious choice with Harvey Barnes missing. I mean, we don't even want to think about Anthony Gordon missing for City, do we?
Yeah, and if we do, I think it's Joe Willock's spot to lose, really, because he operated that role so well, not just on Saturday but earlier in the season as well. But again, I mean, that's 3 out of 4 left wing options gone. The luck is really starting to turn at a such an untimely opportunity. So yeah, I think if Gordon doesn't make it this weekend, we'll see Willock, Isak, and Murphy. Does he maybe bring Sanusi on the bench? And if that's the case, given that they've got very, very limited wide options, I don't know. But one thing's for certain, we really need that luck to change.
Yep, we certainly do. Joe Blake grabbed the winner with 82 minutes on the clock. Good finish from close range. And he was great all afternoon, wasn't he? And we need to see more of that. A lot of people in the comments saying he needs to be building on what was a fantastic performance.
Yeah, he does. And look, I hope he gets some more game time in the next couple of weeks, and he isn't just coming on in fits and starts and little cameo appearances. But yeah, as we touched on earlier in the show, not to repeat ourselves, he will have came on massively for that, even if he got a little bit fortunate with the first goal. And I think crucially, it's important to mention what a tough week he's had, what a tough month he's had because of that abuse aimed at him, that horrific abuse. So that will be fantastic for him to maybe silence some of the doubters, and also, credit to the club and Eddie Howe for backing him and throwing him straight back in.
Yeah, certainly so. And hopefully those who were delivering that unacceptable abuse get found by the police and get dealt with appropriately. We've got Omar saying the game showed one thing, that we have a few players lacking with confidence, one being Sean Longstaff. And he did come in for a little bit of criticism despite the victory. Do you think it was fair, or was it's Sean Longstaff and he's always the one that seemingly was targeted?
Maybe it was a little bit of both. I mean, I'm not going to go on here and say I thought Sean Longstaff had a good game. I didn't. I think, when we've just spent the entire episode talking about those players that took their chances, I think Sean Longstaff is one who falls into the other category. He's had such limited minutes this season that was a real opportunity for him to sort of remind people what he can do, and I don't think he did. Coupled with the fact that it was Sean Longstaff, and maybe some of that abuse was more than we would have seen if it was a Miley or a Willock performance.
I thought Miley looked very good. He had that one running in the box where he got the shot off, but he is looking like there's a player then, and long may that continue. John says, what were your thoughts on Pope, Matt Target, Tino and Longstaff on Saturday? Seen on social media that they weren't good enough and that they need to be sold in the summer. I'm not too sure, says John, but what are your thoughts?
As we've touched on Nick Pope, I can't really see what he did wrong, if I'm totally honest. Made a couple of really good saves, kept them in at points. I don't think he could have done too much with the 2 goals. Longstaff, as we said, I don't think he played too well. Target, yeah, all right, not too bad. I think for someone who's had so long out, he's came back into the team quite well. Obviously, there was interest in him in January, but Newcastle didn't want to lose him for obvious reasons after selling Lloyd Kelly. And Tino, now, I think this is a little bit of an interesting one, because I think there's a little bit of a sentiment starting to build on social media that Livramento might need a little period out the team. I don't know what you think. I don't know what the people in the comments listening think. I thought in that game, who did they play before Birmingham? Was it Fulham, maybe?
Yeah, at home, didn't they?
Yeah, that was the last home game, wasn't it, before the cup games?
Yeah.
I thought Tino in that game struggled, and I don't think he had his best game Saturday. Now, that has obviously coincided with Kieran Trippier coming back into the team for Arsenal and really playing well. I don't know. I still think Tino probably gets the nod in the league going forward, but I thought it was quite telling he started on Saturday, and he's maybe just going through a little patch where he's not at his best. I don't know what you think about that.
I can see the argument for starting Kieran Trippier in the next few games in the Premier League. Look, long term, it's Tino Livramento's spot to lose. He's going to be Newcastle's right back for many, many years. He's had a good season. I think players will always have ups and downs. And maybe when you've been as good as you have, and then suddenly you have 2 or 3 bad games, it's more noticeable. I think with Kieran Trippier, what's really interesting is that, as we mentioned on our late night podcast after Newcastle beat Arsenal, was that formation really suited Kieran Trippier. He looked as good as he did because the team was the back line was built for him in many ways. I think you have to then play a similar formation like that for him to be as good. Now, is he going to do that against Man City? Is he going to do that against Forest? Arguably not. You can see him just reverting back to type. And that's when the question over Trippier versus Livramento really becomes a difficult one to answer, because I think if you go back to the formation that we've seen used for every Premier League game really all this season, then I wouldn't be playing Kieran Trippier, especially against pacey wingers. If Doku's playing for Man City, or if he's up against whoever he is on the left, Hudson-Odoi, for example, then I think Trippier will find it difficult with that pace, unless it is 5 at the back like it was against Arsenal, which I just don't see happening.
Well, I mean, the one reason it probably won't happen in the next couple of weeks is, does Eddie Howe have 3 fit centre-backs to play and 2 wing-backs? I don't know. I think on a normal day with everyone fit, Manchester City away might be the perfect opportunity to use that system. And look, it's a little bit of recency bias, isn't it? If you'd have asked people 10 days ago, who do you want to start at right back, they'd say Tino Livramento. Trippier comes back in and absolutely has a storm against Arsenal, and all of a sudden people are like, well, maybe I would have Kieran Trippier in. It could all change in another 10 days, but that's the beauty of having those 2 there. I think people won't grumble if either of them play, and I think that's the beauty of keeping Kieran Trippier at the club.
But going back to John's question, if anyone is suggesting that Tino Livramento needs to be sold, what are you on about? ridiculous. He's had a few bad games, but he's certainly not going anywhere. How we have a word. Brighton in the next round, as you've mentioned at the top of the show, not a bad tie, is it? Obviously being at home, and we hopefully we can harness that atmosphere that we saw for the Arsenal game, but it's going to be a difficult challenge.
Yeah, look, it will definitely. I think, a big plus that Newcastle are at home, even though Brighton have came up here this season and stunned them somewhat. But I'm just glad that it's a good game at St James's Park. I think the crowd will be up for it again, like they were at Arsenal. I think Eddie Howe has drilled into the players that they've got to give this competition the same amount of effort as they have the Carabao Cup. They're not content with just one cup final. And look, you've got to look at some of the results, not just in the last round, but the round before. Some big teams knocked out. And I think Newcastle, I saw yesterday on Twitter, they're the second favourites with the bookmakers to win it. That's a statement.
Yeah, it certainly is. And hopefully they can live up to that. Plenty of people on in the comments. Niall saying Tino started slowly, but he's improved greatly after it. Novo saying Tino is awesome, but can't pass the ball forward. And it's a huge issue in the build-up. We keep getting trapped by the press on his side. Although he did have a role in one of the goals, didn't he? Or, yeah, one of the Newcastle's chances anyway on Saturday. Niall says Tino has to get used to the better teams for his development. He also says Trippier's legs are gone, unfortunately, which Novo disagrees with. He says Trippier's legs are not gone. Clearly, Eddie told him to work on his personal issues, put football behind his family. Once he gets to run, his quality will shine again. Obviously, that's Novo's opinion there. Plenty of people saying he just needs one of games, Trippier, and we'll see him back to his best through the Garden Gate. What a wonderful name. Says the next few weeks will really show where this club are and how much work our summer budget has to do. We've got a few questions sent in via email as well. Before I do that, I just want to get your take on the Carabao Cup Final tickets. Aaron, everyone's got an opinion. You're likely to sit on the fence as always. The club never going to be able to please everyone. It's not a decision or conversation I would have wanted to have how best to handle this and the demand. Your take on it all?
I think, again, not to sort of give a poor answer and sit on the fence, but I agree with you. They're never going to win. You're always going to have some sections of the fan base not happy. What have the gripes been in the last 24 hours? Has it been around loyalty points? People are annoyed
No
that
loyalty
that's not
points. It's pots, members who have been to every tie shoved in with other members who haven't been, and it's one of those. It's a bit like Oasis tickets. Everyone's got an issue with the way you can get tickets, unless you get a ticket and then you haven't got an issue with it. It's just one of those, isn't it? Unfortunately, everyone wants to be there. Everybody wants to support a team. Everybody wants to be at Wembley. That's totally understandable. That there's a bit of heartache amongst fans who can't get tickets. But unfortunately, there's only so many tickets to go around, and you'll have to support your club from either the pub, home, or elsewhere in the city. Right, on to questions then. Davey has emailed in, and you guys can as well, by the way. The email address is theeibwpodcast@reachplc.com. Davey has written, and he says, hi guys, love the show. Do you think Paul Mitchell is looking to target younger, yet to be established players rather than spending big on those who have the reputation? I feel mixed about this. If this is indeed his approach, how about you guys?
Look, I don't think they're putting all their eggs in that basket. I think there's certainly an element of that in the recruitment at Newcastle these days, whether it's the first team or for the academy. I mean, we've seen in the last couple of days they've gone abroad and managed to get some really exciting youngsters into the club. Yildiz from a Turkish side, and they're also chasing Cordero, a young lad who plays for Malaga in the second tier in Spain. So those are players who are going to be signed for the future. Then you probably look at the signing of Will Osula in the summer and say he sort of fits that mold, but he was obviously, sort of parachuted straight into the first team, hasn't actually played for the under-21s. But I don't think that is going to be all they do. I think there's definitely, staff and scouts targeting those type of players to try and get good deals for Newcastle 5-10 years down the line. But I think, this summer we'll start to see some more established signings coming through as well.
And how much Newcastle United need those established signings to go on to the next level?
Look, I mean, it's huge, and again, I can't believe we've gone 45 minutes through the episode without talking about it. But it's been 3 windows, hasn't it, since Eddie Howe strengthened his first team, and I think they need 2 or 3 really decent additions to come straight in and fill some slots in the starting 11. And I think to do that, they need to be players with either Premier League experience or experience abroad, decent age profile. Not players like Osula who are going to have to be bedded in and take time. I think they need to come in and hit the ground running. So it's massively important they do that in the summer.
And in terms of the summer plans, are we expecting what we've seen with Newcastle, do you think, in recent windows where, or not recent windows, the windows prior to that, where they've had a plan and they're kind of sticking to it no matter what? They've got a targeted list of players, and if they don't get A, they'll go for B and so on. And regardless of they get into the Champions League or not, they've got a pool of players they will be targeting.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, Champions League qualification is going to have a massive say on what they can do in the summer, because a lot of Newcastle United's targets will also be watched by City and Arsenal and Liverpool, as we saw in January, really, with City going out and signing Kuzanov, who Newcastle really wanted, but they wanted to wait till the summer. So that will play a big part. But I think we've seen it with Newcastle, haven't we, in the last 4 or 5 or 6 windows where they maybe haven't got a player in January, but they've gone out and got them in the summer. Sven Botman's obviously the big one with that. With that being said, does that mean they go back in for someone like Mark Gay? I'm not too sure, but I think they'll definitely have their list and they'll be sticking to it.
Kyle has emailed in from Victoria in Australia. So thank you very much, Kyle, for sending in this question. He says, I'm keen to get your opinion on the next transfer window. We're led to believe we'll have all this money in the summer to splurge after 3 windows of nout. Do you feel clubs are going to recognise this and try to take us to the cleaners like the Gay situation? Although now we actually have money to spend, I feel we could be in a similar position of being told we can't spend because the Newcastle tax is going up and up. I was also the only one who made a drinking game for every time, and you said refreshing. Well, I'm sure you got drunk quite often then, although not in recent months, because I stopped it because I got a negative comment. So in one way, I give the people what they wanted. On Kyle's question there, it's a really interesting one because, yeah, clearly I think selling clubs will automatically assume Newcastle have got this big pot of money to spend, and Newcastle will be careful in how they spend it and they won't be held to ransom. But at the same time, they can't go another window without spending significantly and improving the squad with at least 1 or 2 massive big signings, big upgrades. And I think it's interesting because as much as I can see the logic and understanding and people you talk to explaining why they haven't really been active in recent windows, it does lead you to Kyle's point there in the question that actually when you go knocking for whoever it might be, Brian and Burma or even Mark Gay, clubs will go back and say, well, actually, you haven't spent in 3 windows really. We think you've got a lot of money to spend, so we are going to ask for an extra 10, 15 million here, and it'll leave Newcastle in a difficult position. I guess, Aaron, that's when the negotiation skills of Paul Mitchell come in, and we'll really see how good of a sporting director he is.
Yeah, look, I don't know how much I subscribe to that. I think Newcastle will have their price, and I don't think they'll be bullied by other clubs, talking about Newcastle taxes or no spend for 3 windows. I think Newcastle will not want to pay over the odds. And I actually think that the more worrying thing is probably what Eddie Howe always alludes to, and that's that they don't really have any friends in England. I don't think you're ever going to see a team like Chelsea ever again sell someone like Lewis Hall to Newcastle, because Newcastle have gone, above Chelsea essentially in many people's eyes in the last couple of years. So I think that the important thing for me, and I think it's something that we've maybe seen in the last couple of months, is being able to find those gems abroad where clubs maybe aren't worried about how well Newcastle are doing. And I think the one interesting thing for me was Mark Gay in the summer was the main target. Now, Kuzanov was the January target, and maybe that's them saying we're going to go abroad and maybe find someone for half the price.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer to say the least. Aaron, your camera's gone and your mic is muted, so maybe someone's at the door. I'm going to attempt to keep going. This is the wonderful problems you face going live. Where did you go? Was the postman at the door?
No,
It
I'm
disappeared.
here. Sorry, I didn't realize I'd went off.
He disappeared. Yeah, John says we cannot rely on Eddie consistently pulling Roberts out of the hat. He hasn't been supported in the last 3 windows. Next time around, it's Paul Mitchell's time to step up to the mark. We've got Darren says this summer we need at least 5 quality players added to the squad. But if we make you, we need to be careful of wages to turn over to UEFA rules. Obviously, because those changes are coming in. And Niall, along similar lines, saying if we get Champions League, we need 6 or 7 £40 million players to have a good enough squad. I mean, that would be a spend of £280 million. So can't quite see that happening. I don't think Newcastle United will have that much money to spend. I still think they're going to have to box clever. I do, as you said, Aaron, I do feel it's going to be a really significant summer. But I can't see 6 or 7 players at that price coming in. I think what you're more likely to see, 2, maybe 3 big name signings coming in for maybe 40 to 70 million pounds. They will have to, I feel, sell some of these fringe players. But I do think they'll keep their big stars, especially if they get the Champions League. But, I think it'll be more, less is more, I think is the phrase I'm looking for.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a similar window, maybe to 23, where they got Tonali, and that was their big marquee signing. But they also spent, pretty decent chunks on Livramento and Harvey Barnes as well, in between 30 and 40 million. I think for 3 key positions, I wouldn't be too surprised. I'm not too sure about them selling their big stars. I think it all depends where they finish in the table. But certainly, I think what we probably need to remember in the summer, when they hopefully start spending again, is all the heartache we've gone through in January and last summer where they didn't sign anyone. It's all been building to the summer, and hopefully their financial picture is going to look, significantly better in a couple of months' time.
I'm not one to remind people of my predictions and how often I get them right, but I did say as far back as the start of November that they would not sign anyone in January because they'd be keeping their powder dry for the summer. You go back and check it out, lads and ladies. I did say that, and I still think that will be the case. We've got a lot of people in the comments here saying, I think it will be 5 players as well, says Carlo. Just remember, turnover will increase. I mean, 5 players would be quite something. Aaron, price tags aside, how many players do you see coming in terms of numbers? I mean, is 5 a realistic prospect?
I think they'll go. I mean, they're going to need to go out and sign a right winger first and foremost. I think they'll want another centre half in as well. Definitely, there's 2 straight away in the first team. And then after that, do you maybe start looking at backups? Do you maybe look at a new keeper if Dubravka goes to rival Pope? Does somebody come in alongside Alexander Isak, especially with Callum Wilson's future maybe up in there? There's already 4. Maybe 1 more at fullback for good measure. A future Trippier replacement. I don't know. 5's maybe not too ridiculous, but I think a lot of a good chunk of those 5 wouldn't be your big marquee signings, and there might be youngsters with an eye on the future.
Carlo said a striker, a right winger, 2 centre backs, and a goalkeeper. Niall says I'd sell all the keepers. Oliver says possibly 1 from Bournemouth. So I think he's aiming for Antoine Semenyo. But again, like you're looking at that market, and Semenyo is brilliant. Alanga, brilliant. Brian Mbeumo, brilliant. But you're looking at least 50 to 60 million for either one of those 3. So that tells you how much Newcastle United are going to be looking at this summer. Interesting, you said a backup if Martin Dubravka goes. Now, not a Trippier, Baron, and I promise you this isn't what I'm going to do. Or I mean, it'd be funny to see you fall over. But you've been convinced James Trafford is going to be a Newcastle United player. So just on what you've just said there, does that change, or is James Trafford the backup?
No, I mean, what I said there about a goalkeeper wasn't necessarily to say that they are going to play backup to Nick Pope. I wouldn't be too surprised if they did go out and sign a goalkeeper who might come straight into the team. Purely what I meant was just sort of being a Dubravka replacement from the goalkeeper, whether that's a backup or a starting player, I don't know. But I think this summer we will see another goalkeeper coming, even though it's all they seem to sign these days.
Yeah, they're going to have to make room for goalkeepers because they are quite well stocked. And obviously, I mean, someone a few weeks ago suggested that maybe Nick Pope to Burnley and James Trafford the other way around in some sort of swap cash deal, and that wouldn't possibly be the worst idea. Where's the priority lie? Is it a right winger? Is that the top of the list?
Yeah, definitely. No questions asked.
It's interesting, isn't it? I saw this mentioned over the weekend that Newcastle United's scouting system seems to have it absolutely nailed on. If you look at the players that we know they looked at, some they approached, some they didn't, but it just seems like near enough every player that they did approach and maybe didn't manage to get over the line, they're looking like real talents. Joe Pedro at Brighton, for example, Anthony Elanga at Nottingham Forest finding his feet.
Ekatike.
Do you subscribe? Who was the player you mentioned there?
Ekatike in Germany as
Yeah,
well.
Atletico now scoring goals in the Bundesliga. You subscribe to that notion that everything is looking rosy when it comes to at least the targets that are out there in the public, and it shows that Newcastle United are targeting the right players.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Elanga was the big one because we all sort of scratched our head at the start of the season, didn't we, about why they made such an 11th hour bid for him on deadline day. Obviously, didn't get very far with it, but he's had an absolute standout season. And not only the players that they're being, sort of linked with, going for, not getting, but it's worth remembering that they've had so few mistakes in terms of the players they've actually signed. I mean, you can probably count on one hand the mistakes that they've done in the window. You would maybe put someone like Vlachodimos in that, but they were sort of forced to do that deal. Is Harvey Barnes maybe on the cusp of falling in that category? I don't know. But apart from that, Botman, Tonali, Bruno, Isaac, Pope, just fantastic recruitment. And it gives you, real excitement for the future and for the summer.
It does. And look, John's in the comments here and he says, keeping the powder dry for the summer is one thing, but what about this season? Opportunities knocking now and injuries are endangering us. But again, as we've said, with the closure of the window not too long ago, ideal world, Newcastle would go out and strengthen, or would have strengthened last month, but they're just stuck by what they can do because of the daft financial rules. And hopefully this summer can be a little bit different. Final couple of questions then, Aaron, before I let you go and enjoy your afternoon off. Barry has emailed in and says, would it have made sense to keep Alex Murphy as opposed to send him out on loan once Lloyd Kelly had left? I never felt that they had enough depth to sell Kelly.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We had a story on our website yesterday about Alex Murphy, who got his first goal for Bolton over the weekend. Congratulations to him. But there's no recall clause in that loan deal, which means he is, a Bolton player till the end of the season unless he gets injured. That's really, really concerning. Again, as we touched on it earlier in the show, Charlie MacArthur going to Carlisle isn't ideal. Does that mean someone like Heffernan's going to have to come into the first team? Well, that's a huge step up from under 21 level. So yeah, they're looking, very light, really. And I think as that comment there, sorry, I can't remember who said it, John maybe. I think they were looking like even before Lloyd Kelly went. When Lloyd Kelly went, I thought, could they maybe now have a little bit of wiggle room financially to do some deals? That proved not to be the case, and ultimately they have left themselves light. They've also been very, very unlucky. Let's just say that. Because since the transfer window was closed, Sven Botman's picked up a knee injury, which we don't know the severity of, and Dan Burns picked up a groin injury. So just typical Newcastle United luck coming back to bite them.
And just typical as well. I mean, imagine if they had to bring, or they managed to bring Alex Murphy back just to sit on the bench just when he's starting to get a run of games under his belt at Bolton. Although he did play left wing against Reading, which is quite interesting. And he's also featured at left back, featured in the last 3 games, started the last 2, and also grabbed the goal as well. So long may that continue. Paula has asked, she says, well, she's written and said, hello, Aaron and Andrew. With Newcastle going strong in both cup competitions, would you take 2 Wembley finals, hopefully a cup, ahead of the league form slipping?
So is this, would I take 2 Wembleys to miss out on top 4, maybe? To miss out on Europe altogether?
She's made the point about at least 1 cup being won. I think that's the difference, isn't it? I think the question is, what's more important, the trophy, Champions League? I can see both sides of the argument. As I've said before, business side, it's Champions League. But in terms of that first trophy, 70 years since the last domestic cup, has to be lifting the cup, doesn't it? But
is that what you're saying? You'd go cup over top 4?
If you could guarantee me a cup victory, and they miss out on the Champions League, then yes, I would. And I also think that would stop maybe a demand of the likes of Isaac, Bruno, Gordon saying, I'm leaving in the summer, I want to leave in the summer because you haven't got Champions League football. I think if they miss out, but they've won a cup and secured some form of European football, I think the stay. I think if you get to Wembley and you miss out on the lifting the trophy next month, and you get the Wembley miss out in May, it's maybe a little bit different. I think you then do have to qualify for the Champions League to be a successful season, but it's a bit of a minefield. Everyone's going to have different opinions. You're going to sit on the fence, right?
No, I'm going to say I think I'm going to stick to what I said in 2023, and that is I think I would always go top 4 over a cup. But I get your point, and I get anybody's point, because it would be the first cup in a generation, more than a generation. I understand why people are so desperate for it, but I think I'm going head over heart.
I think that's the answer from business side, is that the Champions League will just generate more money, and you need the Champions League to grow, and then the result of that is being able to compete in all competitions because you have a stronger squad. But sometimes the heart does overrule the head. And you ask me in a week's time, I'll probably have a different answer.
Ask me the same question when we're sat at Wembley in 6 weeks' time, and I'll give you a very different answer. It will be cup all the way.
Well, fingers crossed they can pick up the cup. You got the trivia ready and ready to go?
I certainly do, and it's an absolute bumper one today. So, as always, we're going with the players that played for Newcastle and the team they've just played, which was Birmingham. And I've got on this list 20 players for you to go through. You're going to get a decent chunk of them. I think there's some very, very well-known names on them, but I think I will have to give you a hand with some of them. So
I love how confident you are within my ability to get this. Every week you say you're going to do well, and every week I kind of feel. Although last week I did all right.
Maybe it's because I've got the list in front of us, and I think, oh yeah, of course he played. But I suppose for you it is much different. But I'll give you a hand, as I always do. Just make sure you're not looking in the comments.
Right. Well, I'm going to put my hand there. What I will say is that Omar's already taken my first guess. That I was about to say Stephen Carr. So
right, okay. Well, but there's 2 already in the comments. So we've got Stephen Carr, we've got Shane Ferguson. Omar's then put Dan Burns. So there's 3. You need to start going now before the viewers get them.
Right. Let me have a think then. Peter Lovenkrantz.
Yep, that is 1.
Well, technically it's 4, but okay. I see. It's not as easy as you think, and also my arm's starting to hurt now because I'm blocking the comments. Birmingham. But honestly, like,
do you want some hints?
Yeah, you're gonna. My mind's gone totally blank.
Right. Well, the first one, I think this first one has been on every single one of these that we've done. Newcastle legend who played for about 13 teams. Newcastle, Man United, Sunderland, City, Fulham, Birmingham, Blackburn. Striker.
Andy Cole.
Andy Cole.
I don't know why I said Lee Clark there.
Yeah. There is another. There's another Lee. Butt. Yeah, Nicky Butt's in there. 05, he was at Birmingham. There's another Lee midfielder, not Lee Clark. Loves fighting his own teammate on the pitch.
Oh, Lee Boy, yeah.
Yeah. Then you've got one of your good friends from your job at St James's Park. 90s.
90s. Oh God, I'm going to offend someone now. No, JB. Go on. John Beresford played for Birmingham.
John Beresford played for Birmingham in 1999. Do you want to know how many games he played?
2.
1.
I'm not even sure he'll remember that, to be fair.
Right. This one's an interesting one. He was in the squad on Saturday for Birmingham, signed by Rafa at Newcastle, and had 1 season in the Championship.
Signed by Rafa.
Came off the bench, I think, in the closing stages on Saturday.
I was too busy feeding my little one.
And his name is Grant Hanley.
Do you know what? I looked at that the other day. I looked at that when I was doing my research for the show, and I was like, oh, Grant Hanley. Didn't realise he moved from Norwich. Okay, I'll give you that one.
Yeah, we've got 2 players currently in the Newcastle United squad. One's in the first team. One of them I don't think has ever played for Birmingham's first team. Youngster, really exciting. I love him.
So Sanusi.
And also the opposite end of the scale, someone who probably won't play for Newcastle, come at the end of his career, signed in the summer.
John Ruddy.
Goal scorer for Newcastle, who scored Birmingham's famous goal to beat Arsenal in the cup final.
Obafemi Martins.
Winger for Newcastle, also played for Palace and Luton. I didn't know he played for Townsend. Yeah.
Newcastle,
former Newcastle player, now tearing it up for Forest.
Chris Wood.
Chris Wood. God, how many is that? Right, we've got 5 left, all from a similar era, really. Well, some of them are. Centre back, currently working for the club in an academy role.
Ooh.
Or in a recruitment role, or it's definitely at the club.
Peter Ramage?
Peter Ramage, that's the one. Defender, Scottish, played for Newcastle and Sunderland.
Steve Caldwell?
That's the one. Another defender who... Did he score against Man United on his debut?
David Edgar?
That's the one. Midfielder who is now a co-commentator, Palace legend, played for Newcastle 02-04.
Darren Ambrose?
Darren Ambrose. And 2 left. One is a Brazilian from the 90s.
Brazilian? Nah, we haven't had many Brazilians.
Brazilian. I'm going to give you, it's Fumaka, and Chris Holland is the other one.
Oh, Chris Holland. There's a name, ladies and gents. Go and look
that one. That was a long one. Sorry, I should have maybe just done the most popular 10 there.
That might be the longest list of Newcastle / other teams they've played for list. That was whew. Yeah. See, I'm not very good at quizzes and stuff. I would be rubbish on Mastermind. I just freeze.
Yeah, no, so it is much easier when I'm sat reading them, but you did very well with the hints I gave you.
Well, thank you very much for coming onto the show on your day off. It is much appreciated, Aaron. I'm sure those watching and listening will show their appreciation with the rounds of applause and a like and a thumbs up on the video and a share across social media of this very episode. Thank you, as always, for watching. Make sure you do hit the link in your podcast description box for a discounted exclusive offer on your NordVPN plan. And hopefully later this week, myself and Aaron will be able to announce our Wembley plans happening on the Saturday of that weekend. We're going to be doing a live show somewhere with some special guests. I'm just firming up the final details, but look out for that if you're heading down there. We'd love to see as many as you as possible. I will be dropping the links across all social media. We'll mention it in podcasts once I've got the details confirmed. Very excited for what it will be. I'm not going to share too many details now, but do watch out and hopefully have everything confirmed in the next few days. But for now, we'll let Aaron get off. Probably going to go and get beat paddle or something, I imagine, because that's his new thing these days.
No paddle today, football tonight instead.
Look at that, 2 nights in a row. You got beat 19-5 last night, by the way, ladies and gents, just to spoil it. But thanks, Aaron. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you to you guys, as always. And we'll